Well, a very pleasant good afternoon, everyone. John Johnson here with Just a Thought on this Christmas Eve 2025. Today, just a thought about adventures in camping. When our son Josh was a member of our fellowship's scouting ministry was called Royal Rangers. I always found it intriguing that the camping manual for the program was entitled Adventures in Camping. And indeed, that was typically our experience. Camping was an adventure. No title to the book could have been any closer to the truth. For one, it always seemed that once we got settled into camp that someone, or perhaps several someones, would almost immediately become ill from camp food. And then, of course, there were those middle-of-the-night issues with young men that probably should have taken care of their business before they went to bed, and then they were up in the middle of the night, and we had to accompany them to the latrine. Then, of course, it seemed that every year, pardon me, a little trouble with my voice today, it seemed that every year during the annual statewide gathering that the district called Powwow, by the way, that took place the first week of June at the height of severe storm season, it seems that severe weather would, in fact, visit the campgrounds with a vengeance. Can't tell you the number of times that we had to put up tents that had not only just blown down, but had blown away. And, of course, there were the hailstorms and even the odd occasional tornado that passed close enough that we had to bug the boys out to the structures where the toilets and the showers were located. But I digress. Needless to say, we had many adventures together camping as a father and son. Has it ever occurred to you that our Heavenly Father also had an adventure in camping? An adventure in camping with the whole of humanity. The Gospel of John, unlike Matthew and Luke, lacks any specific details regarding the birth of Christ, but that said, the Gospel of John does not lack information about Christ's advent or his coming to live among mankind. In fact, John chapter 1, verse 14 says this, "The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. And we have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only who came from the Father, full of grace and truth." The Word, the divine, eternal, timeless, limitless Logos of God, took the injured flesh of humanity upon himself and came to live with us, among us, alongside us, to walk our sod and breathe our air. But the real significance of this event, I believe, is to be found in the word translated, made his dwelling. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. This singular word, translated with the three English words, made his dwelling, comes from the Greek root skenou, which means literally to encamp or to dwell in a tent. Literally, friends, God pitched his tent of flesh among us. And according to John, we have witnessed by observation his glory, his influence, the full weight of his influence, full of grace and truth. God ventured out by his own will and choice to pitch a tent of flesh among us and to have with us a great adventure in camping. A great adventure in camping with the whole of mankind, the whole of humanity. You know, when the children of Israel left Egypt, God instructed Moses on the mountain to build a tabernacle, a tent, where he would live, God would live, encamped with his people in the center of their camp. Instructions were given that three of each of the 12 tribes would encamp around the tabernacle at each of the 4 compass points. God not only lived among them, dwelling, if you will, but that dwelling was portable. It was not a fixed building and not an established building, such as most churches worship in today. No, this was a completely portable dwelling space. When God directed them to move on to a new campsite, he moved right along with them. Later, much later, King David would desire to build a more permanent and, shall we say, more classy dwelling for God. But the house of the Lord that he built, in which God did permit Solomon to build, David collected the materials, Solomon built it, had a rather remarkable effect upon the people. God was no longer mobile among them. He was fixed up on the holy hill of Zion in a permanent structure. And it wasn't long before the people began to respond to God with greater indifference. I have likened it to years for this. It's like they put God in a nursing home up on the hill, and they would visit Grandpa 3 times a year, special holidays. And on those holidays, they'd take him a nice gift, basically affirm what a great grandpa he was, and then promptly leave, go back to the valley below, and live pretty much the way they pleased, not at all the way God pleased. But I'm convinced that God never forgot about that tent, that tabernacle, the tabernacle where he camped with his people. You see, friends, that's the story of Christmas. That's the glory of Advent, of the Incarnation. God once again pitched his tent among us. The grand and glorious embodiment of the divine, holy, righteous, mighty God pitched his tent and lived among us in a perfect mobile home, if you will, where he could move easily among us. And as John said, we beheld his glory, the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. And by the way, that was the way it was supposed to be, I believe, all along. As Paul, the apostle, declared to the Athenians in his sermon on Mars Hill, chapter 17 of Acts, verses 24 and 25, the God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth and does not live in temples built with human hands. And he is not served by human hands, as if he needed anything, because he himself gives life to all men, breath, and everything else. John Johnson here, and for Christmas Eve 2025, that's just a thought.